In this video we'll be looking at Windows fundamentals for legacy PCs. Now this operating system is based on Windows XP Embedded. It was released to manufacturing on the 8th of July 2006 and it was really aimed for running on older, less powerful hardware. It was never released to consumers. It was not a buyable edition of Windows. It was, however, made for businesses. So the main idea was to give businesses something that they could install on their existing hardware, and Microsoft really wanted them to upgrade from the 9X series. So the idea was, if you had a computer that could run Windows 98 perfectly, as a business, why would you want to waste money getting yourselves hundreds of new computers just to run XP? So the idea behind this was give them a version of XP, which they called Windows Fundamentals for legacy PCs, that is able to run on computers that are less powerful and have older hardware. Now, Windows Fundamentals had the code name IGA, and it went to manufacturing on the 8th of July 2006. So that was actually about 5 years after XP, and actually just months before Windows Vista went to manufacturing. So really actually closer to Vista than XP in terms of release date. If you look at this install process, you'll notice, by the way, probably that it's very similar to the 9X install process, and I'm guessing that's part of the tactic really with this. Obviously aimed at businesses that had hardware currently running a 9X operating system. You want them to upgrade to something with better performance, better security, etc. They'd obviously be used to installing 9X operating systems on their hardware, so I can imagine that's why this install process looks so much like a 9X install process. You've even got, for example, this option for different configurations, which is very similar to Windows 98, for example. Right, let's just install a few of those features. You'll probably notice that the space required is very small. In fact, the minimum requirement is 610 megabytes. The recommended is a gigabyte. Obviously you'd like to have a little bit of room to store some files on, but again, very small, like 9X really, in terms of system requirements. Now, you have to install with an administrator password. And actually, let me show you what happens if I type in a very weak password. So here we go, you get a little prompt saying you must enter a strong password. A strong password must be at least 6 letters long and contain characters from at least 3 of the following 4 classes: uppercase, lowercase, digit and symbol. It cannot contain your full name or your username. So let's try that again. Let's accept that one. Right, so I'll let you have a quick look at that install process now. While it's doing that, a bit more information about this. So the most up-to-date version of Windows Fundamentals is Service Pack 3, quite similar to XP, and that was released on the 7th of October 2008, so again that's after Windows Vista even. And as of the 8th of April 2014, like XP, this is now officially unsupported by Microsoft. And like I said, the main aim was better performance, better security for businesses that were currently using 9X. So, for example, this, based on XP, comes with an integrated Windows firewall, which obviously doesn't exist in a 9X. It comes with integrated automatic updates, and things like group policy management, for example. So the businesses would get many new features of a newer version of Windows without having the higher system requirements, so they could run it on their existing hardware. Now, system requirements are very similar to the requirements of a 9X operating system. For example, minimum amount of RAM is 64 megabytes. Now in this virtual machine I've got 128 megabytes currently, which is the recommended RAM, but what I'm planning on doing later is actually dropping it down to 64 and seeing what kind of performance impact that has. Now, in terms of processor, minimum is 233 megahertz, and hard drive space we already talked about is 610 megabytes. Now when I think back to the first computer I had, which ran Windows 98 in 1999, it was the second edition, it had system requirements that were like this. We had 64 megabytes of RAM, for example, so I could have installed this on that computer and probably it would have ran just like XP would have when we finally got our XP computer, which was about 2003 I think, with very similar performance. Now, one of the interesting things I've discovered about this, or read about this, is actually one of the new features that came with XP, which is missing from this, is the ability to run applications in compatibility mode. So if you remember from XP, for example, you could right click, go to properties, run an executable file, and click on the compatibility tab, and you could set it to run in compatibility mode. So if you had an application that worked with Windows 98, for example, and didn't work with XP, you could put the compatibility mode on, and the idea would be that it would hopefully run in your XP install. Now this Windows Fundamentals doesn't have that capability to run in compatibility mode, and I find that kind of strange actually, because I would have thought that would have been one of the main features that a business that had 9X in the beginning would probably want. If they had to upgrade to XP, they'd want some kind of compatibility mode, but that doesn't exist and I'm not quite sure why. Now, you probably noticed the boot screen a minute ago is the Windows XP boot screen. It's not changed at all. It's exactly the same. So even though this is not called Windows XP officially, the boot screen does say Windows XP. You'll also notice now the out-of-box experience is incredibly basic. It's not glamorous at all, which is as you'd expect really for a business version of Windows. Think to Windows 2000, for example, the out-of-box experience was like this. It was just dialog boxes against a blank background. That's all it is. Now what I'm going to do when I get this running is I'm going to do pretty similar to what I did in the video when I looked at Micro XP, and if you haven't seen that video I would recommend that you go and watch it now. I'm going to try installing the latest version of Firefox, the latest version of Skype. I'm going to try Office 2010 originally. If that doesn't work, I'm going to try Office 2007. I'm not going to try Office 2013 because that doesn't work with XP anyway, and I know that. And also, interestingly, you are able to install IE8 on this, so I'm going to attempt to do that as well. I'm also going to install Service Pack 3, which is not integrated in this install, so I'll just let it finish installing. Resetting setup flag, what does that mean? So it's finally restarted now, after about, I think that was the 4th restart during setup, and we're now at the login screen. You can see that the logo is different from XP's, although in terms of style the screen looks the same. It's just that it's got Windows Fundamentals for Legacy PC's logo, and this is very, very interesting. And if you've been watching the Windows Longhorn video series, Windows Vista series, you'll recognise this. The Windows flag logo is white. Now I find that fascinating, because obviously at this point with Longhorn that was in mid-development at this point, and if you've been watching the videos, as I say, you'll know that they used a white Windows logo in many of the Longhorn builds, and I find that fascinating that they put it there now as well. Maybe that's just me. Anyway, so let's log in. Now username, can't remember, is it that? Feels very odd having to type in a password. I don't usually set one. I can't even remember it now. Is it just administrator? Oh, there you go. I don't know if you could hear that, but on my speakers that was the XP login sound, so sounds are the same as an XP. Now isn't that interesting? The recycle bin icon is like the one in Windows 2000. That is very interesting. Okay, as I put the resolution up, the recycle bin icon became the XP icon, so I'm not quite sure what happened there. But there we go. So yeah, this is the default desktop. You will notice that XP's default wallpaper is missing, And actually what I'm going to do now is install guest editions, because the mouse is a little bit sluggish and that usually fixes it, so I'm just going to do this now before I start. Okay, so I've got guest editions installed now and I've restarted. Okay, so let's have a look at, first of all, what customization options are included. So you can switch back to the classic theme. There are no desktop backgrounds. There are 2 screensavers. There's all the default XP themes and all the classic recolors. There's clear type as well. Let's turn that on. Excellent. So this is the default start menu. So it's currently used 915 megabytes, and remember I installed some additional features in setup as well, so it would be even smaller than that if I hadn't. This is control panel. Few mouse pointer schemes there. Sounds, as I said, are the XP sounds. Now, a few ways that this is different to Micro XP, and again I find this quite interesting. You can actually turn on the welcome screen even though this is aimed at businesses, and I don't really see why a business would want a welcome screen on their PCs, but there you go, you can turn that on. Also, it's different to Micro XP in that it does support visual styles as well, whereas Micro XP didn't. You've got all the normal start menu customization there, which is helpful. As I said, Windows Firewall, one of the main reasons for this, to give businesses the better security of XP on their existing hardware. Automatic updates as well. I'm going to set it to notify me at the moment. Right, so let's have a go now at installing some software. What I'm going to do first of all is install the service pack before I do anything else, so let's just do that now. So let's have a quick look while it's doing that at the system information at the moment. So, Microsoft Windows Fundamentals for Legacy PCs version 2006 Service Pack 2. And just remember, this is running on 128 megabytes of RAM, and at the moment it's very responsive actually, considering that. So version 5.1, same as XP, same build number as XP as well. In fact, it's a little bit of fun. Before I do that, let's just put a wallpaper on. And this wallpaper is a really nice wallpaper. And my USB drive, hold on, here we go. It's by Sony Rootkit on DeviantArt. Have a look. Yeah, really, I quite like that. Little homage to XP. Right, so here we go, Service Pack 3. I'm just going to let this install. And when it's finished, we'll have a go at installing some other software as well. So here we are back in Windows Fundamentals. Service Pack 3 has now installed and it's just restarted. And this is the first thing I can see as it's come back on. And it appears we've got a little out-of-box experience now. Interesting. Okay, so let's log in. Let's just verify that that's now installed. So there we go, Service Pack 3. So this is now the most up-to-date it will be, apart from automatic updates, but I don't want them to install automatically, I want to check them. So let's do that. So I'll let that check for updates. And while it's doing that, I thought it would be interesting maybe to have a go actually at seeing whether I can install the other official XP themes in this, and I don't see why I couldn't, to give me a bit more customization. So let's have a look. Yeah, so that's worked fine. I don't remember where I got that installer from, by the way, but it's definitely out there somewhere, and it just collects all the official XP themes together, basically. Let's go for Royale. I think that matches the wallpaper quite well. There you go. So this is the theme from Media Center Edition, in case you don't recognise it. Check for updates. Okay, so while it's doing that, let's have a go now at installing some software. So I'll start with the latest version of Firefox and the latest version of Skype. Now it is a little bit slow, and you can probably tell by looking at it, it's a little bit sluggish, but just remember it's XP running on 128 megabytes of RAM, which is in itself impressive. Okay, so Firefox would appear to be functioning perfectly. There you go, perfect. Let's go to the forum. Forum's a little bit of a dead land at the moment, tiny bit. Sign up if you think you might be interested, because it's really only as useful as we make it, really. So yeah. Let's try IE8 now. Now I downloaded the Windows XP setup version because there wasn't one specifically for Windows FLP. I'm just assuming this one will work. So I'll let that do that. So Internet Explorer 8 is now installed, and it's restarted the system in order to finish doing that. It has taken about a minute to actually load. Now, in my experience, past experience, Internet Explorer 8 was possibly the slowest version of Internet Explorer I have ever used, and certainly running on 128 megabytes of RAM, that is completely apparent. It's incredibly slow. Just use Express settings, stop asking me questions. I also managed to get Skype installed. I'm not going to sign in. I don't think many of my contacts would like their details appearing on YouTube, but just imagine that I've signed in. It does work. Yeah, so IE8 is definitely struggling on 128 megabytes of RAM. And I mean, it would help if it wasn't so completely bloated with all of these things. Just display it. I'm really not that bothered. Anyway, so IE8 works. I'm getting so nostalgic by looking at these XP themes. The Royale theme reminds me of the laptop I got in 2006, I think it was, which was Media Center Edition. It's funny actually, I don't know if you feel the same, let me know, but it's like each theme reminds me of a different phase of my life, because obviously XP was around for such a long time, and I used it for so long. Like, Lunar theme, default, I remember the first day we got XP and I'd been asking my parents, I'd been begging them, please can we get Windows XP for absolutely ages, because my friend had it, and I just thought it looked absolutely amazing compared to Windows 98, which we had at the time. It was like really colourful, and it had really nice new icons and stuff, and I was really, really excited. Eventually, I switched to the silver theme, and I think that became my favourite for quite a long time when I was a teenager. Olive green, I remember, is the one my parents used. I wasn't never really that keen on it. as I say, Media Center Royale. That reminds me of the laptop I got. Embedded I never used actually, but the theme is quite nice. In fact, let's switch to embedded. Don't really see that one as much, do you? That's quite nice. Yeah, and certainly Zune, probably my favourite one these days. This is what I was using at the time when I was switching to Vista, and this was the last theme I used on XP, and I used it for absolutely ages. I love the Zune theme. Really, really stylish in my opinion. So yeah, this reminds me of about 2006, 2007, certainly later on in my XP usability days, moving to Vista. Yeah, I mean the biggest thing for me, and I would imagine it's probably the same for a lot of people, let me know, the biggest thing for me when XP came out was that it looked so much better than Windows 9X did. Just so much more interesting, much more colourful. I mean, I know obviously not everyone likes colourful, not everyone likes Luna, because it is a bit in your face. But I must say I did really like it. So we found some updates which are now installing. While it's doing that, I'm going to try installing Office 2010 now. So everything else I've tried has been successful so far. Let's see whether this is as well. Okay, so I've just finished installing hundreds of updates. Office 2010 also installed. There are a few more updates left, so let's get on with those now. But pretty much, essentially, this is as up to date as it's ever going to be now. So I'll just show you the Office programs. This is Office 2010, which does install on Windows FLP, and if you remember, it doesn't install in Micro XP. But 2007 does. So here are the Office 2010 programs. Just show you Word, for example. I didn't install all of them. It did take an incredibly long time to do this. It must have taken, all together with the updates as well, downloading and installing. And downloading was pretty quick, but installing was the slowest part. Probably about 20 minutes. So just to give you an idea. So here's Word, working perfectly. Stop interrupting me. I'm doing a little bit of promo. So there you go. Yeah, so that's pretty much everything that I'm intending on covering in Windows FLP. It's certainly a very, very interesting operating system to look at, purely considering the circumstances of its construction, really. Yeah, so I think it's been really interesting, and there's a little bit of an identity crisis going on everywhere because it's just called Windows XP in lots of parts, and Windows Fundamentals in others, so it's strange. But that's what makes it so interesting, I think. So I hope you've enjoyed this bonus video to the Windows on Windows XP series. Keep an eye out for more of them, there will be plenty more, and I will see you in the next video. Now, as an aside, because I said I'd do this earlier, this is Windows Fundamentals running this time on 64 megabytes of RAM in my virtual machine, so have a look and compare the responsiveness. Ha, classic. First time I've seen that captured on film. End of support, lovely. What a shame. Okay, so let's just load Firefox, for example. It is definitely slower, isn't it? Oh, why not? Let's go load Skype as well, and let's really overload it. Not too much, but yeah, it's definitely a lot slower now, isn't it? So this is the minimum requirements of RAM, 64 megabytes. I mean, to be fair, it loaded quite quickly. from the boot screen to the desktop quite quickly, really. I didn't show you the boot screen, but it was just 10 seconds or so, or less than that maybe. It's very quick loading to the desktop. I forgot to do this in the main video, but have a look at the services, because there aren't many. So there you go, I've got a few things hogging resources now. Let's see how it copes with that. I'm just going to let it run in real time so you can have a look. Not a good sign, is it? So first up is services. Is Firefox still loading? So here we go. There are still quite a few services, but certainly not as many as in the actual XP release. I'm getting slightly worried now that Firefox is not actually loading, but there is a lot of hard disk activity, so I'm just guessing it's incredibly slow. Let's open it as well. That Skype's popped up now as well. I mean, word loading time wasn't that bad, was it, really? That's okay, actually. So far all the Microsoft software is winning. Let's just check. I definitely clicked on Firefox, didn't I? So there's Skype, that's not too bad. Can you imagine trying to have a web video call on there? 61 megabytes RAM. I want to do that now just to see what would happen. Not much probably. Actually, going in the other direction, I have actually heard of people installing this with quite a lot of RAM and using it as a very kind of fundamental, if you pardon the pun, base for like a gaming PC. You know, an OS, and Windows as well, which is fairly well supported, using very, very few resources. Yeah, it's a good idea, I suppose. If you legitimately own the copy, of course. Okay, I'm tending to give up on Firefox now. I don't know what it's doing. It's just not appearing, is it? I might just leave it. I'll do one more little treat before we go. So I'll shut this down for now, and in a few seconds I will do one last thing. So this is Windows Fundamentals running on 32 megabytes of RAM, which is half of the specified minimum requirements. Up until this point, the boot screen, that took about 10 seconds to get to the point where I started the video. What I've had to do before I've recorded this is I've had to go in with a lot more RAM and turn all the options down, because when I tried doing it the other way around, it took about 11 minutes and I was still waiting for it to change to Windows Classic theme. So, just wait for it to log in. Now I have no experience of using a computer with 32 megabytes of RAM, so if you used to have one that had that little RAM, please let me know about it, because I have no first-hand experience really of that. Now I turned this to the classic theme earlier, so why has it put Luna back? Is it trying to make things more difficult for itself? So what I thought I'd do is just try running some programs, really. in XP on 32 megabytes of RAM. Why not? I'm not going to make any cuts in the video because I want you to really appreciate this in real time with me. So if it's slow, it will be slow. I'm not going to skip anything. What has happened to this theme? What's going on? You probably got that the startup sound just played. A little bit of a lag there, to say the least. Right, classic is what I wanted on. I don't know why it's gone back to that one. I'm hoping this is not going to take 11 minutes this time. It's a bit less actually, because that includes loading time, so probably about 8 or 9 minutes. There we go. See, I knew you could do it, XP. Now, another thing I noticed about this, because before I restarted and put the RAM down, I was going to go in to MS-config and turn off the startup options, but apparently it doesn't exist in Windows Fundamentals. MS-config, not in existence. So I couldn't do that. So let's just try opening Word. So could I use Windows Fundamentals on a 32 megabyte RAM computer to do some word processing? No. Could I use it to surf the internet using Firefox? No. Could I maybe do something like going into WordPad, which is quite lightweight? Well, WordPad doesn't exist, but a Notepad. So I could do some word processing in Notepad. No, I can't even run Notepad. So it transpires that you can run Windows Fundamentals on 32 megabytes of RAM, but you cannot run any programs, which is obviously a slight bit of misfortune, really, isn't it? Makes it entirely pointless. So there we go. You can run it, but you can't run anything else. So, in terms of this video and Windows Fundamentals, we will leave it there, and I will see you. I hope you've enjoyed it, by the way. I have, certainly, and I will see you in the next video. So, see you then.